hello. Bonjour, bonjour. Comment ça va? I hope you're all well. I'm so happy to be with you today. That's my first live in 2022. So before I continue, I just would like to wish you all a merry and very wonderful new year. I know we had a difficult one, but we have to be optimistic and have the positive vibes to start very well now. So today I decided to have something a little bit unusual. Um, it is unusual because of the guest. That guest is, in fact, my own daughter. Okay, I have two daughters, but one of them. And I asked her to come into my life so that she can really describe her experience as a person who had to learn two languages. She had to learn two languages, French and English. So she's going to tell you all about it, and I'm going to see if she's there. So I'm calling on Shani. Shani, are you there? Okay, let's see. Voila. Okay. Ça marche. Okay,
Bonjour.
Shani. All right. So what we're going to do is really to ask you some questions, Shani. Questions which I always wanted to ask you before, but now is the time. You're a woman, so I think that now I can ask them and share with our viewers. Okay?
All
And
right.
if you have any questions or any comments to make, do so. No problem. I'm sure, Shani, you will be you will be delighted to answer those
I
questions,
will
right?
try.
Okay, so just hello to Melo Joy and Leonie Chambers Henry. Bonjour, bonjour. Pleased to see that you're here. So, Shani, my very first question is: do you consider yourself bilingual? Bilingual with French and English?
Um, I would say yes, because when we're talking about being bilingual, we're really talking about the level of proficiency you have in a language, and that's not just speaking; it's understanding when people are speaking to you, so communication overall, or reading and writing. So I personally believe that I am proficient in both English and French in all those areas. Maybe not at the level that I would wish to be at this point in my life, but proficient. So my answer would be yes.
Okay. And at what point in your life did you feel that you had become bilingual?
This is a tricky one. Because I grew up speaking French first. Um, so there's a rule in the household where because half my family is French, half is Jamaican English. Um, us as kids, my sister and I, we had to learn both French and English in order to communicate with both sides of the family. So the rule was speak to my mother in French, speak to my father in English. I think it was a wonderful rule. I'm grateful for it. And I think it helped us in terms of code switching from one language to the other. But of course, I was born in England, so school was in English. So English kind of overpowered or dominated in terms of the two languages. Apparently, I assimilated English very quickly once I started nursery. Um, and I was able to communicate with family members verbally. I would not say I was bilingual as a child because I wasn't proficient in reading and writing at that point. It's only later on in life where I actually sat down and learned how to read and write. At that point, I would probably say I was 15. Let's go with 15. At that point, I can say that I was truly bilingual.
Okay. So your secondary school was in Jamaica, okay, which is here.
Mm-hmm.
We are streaming from Jamaica. And in many traditional schools, they encourage students to take a foreign language, to learn
Mm-hmm.
a foreign language. Was it the case for you?
Yes, I went to one of the traditional high schools, and while I was there, language was one of the five mandatory. CSEC
Okay.
courses that we had to take. So at the time, I wanted to do French because I'm lazy. And I thought, easy egg, you know what? I don't have to spend much time, or so I thought. But three reasons why I didn't do French in high school. One, they did not offer it the year I started because they did not find a French teacher until the year after. Two, we were a bit worried about the cultural differences between the French that I've learned and the one they teach in school. So we didn't want it to be a situation where, the teacher probably thinks that I'm showing off, or the teacher isn't familiar with the sort of vocabulary that I use, which would be European French versus Caribbean French. So like things like cardigan and gloves and stuff like that you don't necessarily use in the Caribbean setting, I would have been using quite a lot because I was living there. So for that reason, we decided to not put myself in that situation. Um, and then the third one, what was the third one? Oh, well, having an extra language under your belt is never a bad idea. It looks good on university applications and such. And I just think it's good for you. But if you can manage to do it, do it. It's just better to improve yourself, build yourself, and it trains your brain. So that was the reason why I did Spanish. I did it up to CSEC. I got my one, thankfully, because my teacher
Did
did not
French
like
help
that.
you
Did French
with
help
the
me?
Spanish?
Well, French and English are both Latin derived languages, so it did help to a certain extent.
You're talking about Spanish. I'm talking about Spanish, not English.
No, I'm
English
talking
and
about French
Spanish.
and Spanish. French and Spanish, right?
Yeah, you said English. That's why.
Oh, sorry, French and Spanish. They're very similar, and in terms of vocabulary, it did help me to remember if I did forget, because sometimes the words are basically the same, just pronunciation is different. Um, But then in fourth form, I remember my mom came to me and she's like, "Oh, I registered you for French CSEC." Me thinking it's the following year. She said, "No, the exam is in 3 months." So I had to learn the whole 5-year grammar and learning to read and write in those 3 months. I managed, I got the one, but during that time where I was doing both, there's so much overlap that when I submitted essays to my Spanish teacher, there are a lot of French words. And because she was learning French at the time, she could pick up on it. But once I got the exam out of the way and I focused on Spanish, I could differentiate between the two languages. So that's the only issue that I had. Um, yeah. And then I did a
So,
little
so you
Chinese
felt that
outside.
3 months wasn't long enough to prepare an exam.
Of course not. But I managed. That big grammar book, I burnt through that within like a month and a half. It was rough. I managed to
So,
do it, guys.
so based on what you've said, would you consider yourself a polyglot?
Polyglot.
Because you also did a bit
No.
of Chinese, of
Yes, I
Mandarin.
did. The Chinese I did was at first it wasn't very structured. We did um what would you say? Upgrade to a more conversational adult class, but there was no
Was that at
official
school?
way. No, that was done privately at CBA, the Chinese Benevolent Association on Old Hope Road, if anyone knows it. Um, so there were no exams. It was just sort of learning and practicing in story times and those kind of things. Though when I did go to university, even though it was on my application that I did Chinese, I chose to do beginner Chinese A for one of my foundation courses because I was like, why am I going to stress myself out picking up a different language? Just do what I already
It
did.
was
They didn't fight me
it was
about it,
easy
so
peasy for
it
easy
was. I
peasy
didn't
lemon
even
squeezy
study. I
for
got
you.
the A, and I dedicated that time that I should have been studying Chinese to something else. So yeah, but I don't think I'm a polyglot because this my Spanish and my Chinese I haven't done since 2013, 2014, and I don't think I'm proficient in those areas at this point in time. But if I did carve out the time, I made the effort to go back and review and start speaking again, writing, reading, it would just come back. But I have to actually make the effort to go back and review and jog my memory. Because it's like any other skill. If you don't keep practicing, you lose it. Right. So no, I don't think I'm polyglot. Maybe one day in the future. We'll see.
Okay. So what would you say that is the best way to learn a language to our viewers?
Mm,
I'm talking about a
best way.
language, not necessarily French,
Any
but a language.
language.
Yeah.
I think the best way is total immersion. Though I know it's not a possibility for everybody, but if you are in a situation where you can do extended period of time total immersion in a country where they don't speak English and you're forced to learn their language, that is the best way. I did it well. I did a year in Guadeloupe. I lived with my grandmother, and I went thinking that the little French that I do at home is big, big French. I know I can manage anything that the world throws at me, but that was a big shock to me because now I'm moving from a. It was after high school, so I'm moving from a stage in my life where everything I understand how the system works and everything is kind of handed to you. Your parents dealt with your bank details as a child. They set up your passport, they set up your health insurance. Everything is done through them. But over there, I was basically an adult. And even though my grandmother helped me, but I had to do a lot of the grunt work. So I had to learn how their system worked. I didn't know any vocabulary involving banking or health insurance, school, nothing. So it was like being thrown in the deep end. You know how you take your toddler and you fling them in the deep end to teach them how to swim? That's what it was like. But there's a period of struggle, and then it kind of tapers off and you manage and it gets better. When I came back after a year, my French improved tenfold. And it's not an experience that I think anyone would give up. So if you can do it, do it. In terms of other alternatives, I did try the pen pal thing for a while, where it was mostly written though. But I would say if you can have a pen pal, preferably someone who doesn't speak your language, um, write emails or text messages now that we're in the new age. No one writes letters. And trying to have video calls and practice your speaking because I didn't do that. It was me, it was just us writing each other's letters and and then it just kind of fizzled out. We didn't really form a bond, so that didn't continue. Um, what else you can do? My mom always says read. Amazing. If you can pick up an article on something that you enjoy, that might be the best thing. Check your dictionary, underline the words that you don't know, structures that you've never seen before, and then try and incorporate them into your writing and your reading. That's your speaking. That's a really good way to learn. Um, I just have not done that. I need to. But what I do is watch movies. So for those that have Netflix, there are some French made movies, and I see more series and movies that are coming out and are available. What I do is to keep the French going subconsciously, I will listen to the French movie in French. I honestly don't like dubbed movies, so I go for the French ones. And then you can put English subtitles at the bottom. So for things that words that I've probably forgotten or words that I'm not familiar with or structures I'm not familiar with, I will just listen and read to catch anything that I've missed. Um, if you really pay attention, there are things that you can pick up from the movies. And plus, it's enjoyable. You're watching a movie, you're having fun, and you're training your brain in the background. It's a win-win for me. I also listen to French music, though beginners, I am not sure if that's the best thing because even in English, you find that singers to match the rhythm and the rhyming, they have to alter the pronunciation of words to fit into the song. And then they use a lot of slang. So don't be discouraged if you listen to a song and you only understand like 35%. And then the music that I listen to tends to be a lot from the Caribbean. So there's a lot of Creole in it. I don't understand a lick of Creole. but I'm trying. So some songs they alternate between French and Creole. Some do French and English. It all depends. Just try and see how much you can, you know, pick up. And if you're really, really interested, just you can Google lyrics of everything nowadays. You just go and look up what the words mean. And if it's Creole, then you just skip over it. Or you can try learning Creole. It's up to you.
Have you
Whatever
picked
is
up
your fun.
anything in Creole from your
Um,
songs?
well, I have a very long playlist where I put all the French songs. So if anybody wants access to it, I can send it to them. It's everything. There's Zouk, probably some Zouk love. There's compa on there. There's some like what do you call it? Art French R&B. Not sure what you would call it. And I
Mm.
think there's some rap. There's everything in there. So if anyone wants access, I can send them the link. It's like almost 300 songs now. I've just been compiling over the years as I come into contact with good songs. Um, and the last
Mhm.
thing I would say, don't be ashamed of not knowing something. Just own up to it. People would be more inclined to teach you and help you that way. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Like I asked my grandma will call me and she says something that I don't understand. And I ask her, what does that mean? She will explain in French what the word means. And then if you're like me, once I get something wrong, I never forget it. So you really shouldn't be afraid to not know something. It's a learning curve. You can't know everything, right? And I think those are the only ideas I have for that question.
Okay. We have a question from Marvin Jackson. Bonjour, Marvin. He says, what do you suggest for a child who is 2 years old, growing up in Jamaica and learning French? Is it worth it drilling the French so early? What would you
Two
say, Shani?
years. Listen, I have found that kids are like sponges. So you can encourage him. I don't know if there are like electronic games that they can use or have a French tutor, and you need to monitor progress because kids kind of have like a short attention span, but they're sponges. So you really can train their brain from early. That's what happened to me. Sorry. But the thing is, I don't, it has to be consistent. You can't do a little French here and then nothing, and then a little again. It has to be consistent up to a stage where, I don't know, maybe they're in high school and they take up French. It has to be consistent because, as I said before, if they're not practicing, they will forget it. But children, even in English, you have to be careful what you do around kids because they'll just repeat it. It's the same for anything, behavior, English, French, whatever language. If you're interested in having your child learn French now, I would say go for it. Just ensure that it's going to be consistent over a long period of time so that they don't lose it because it would be a shame. So that
Well,
answers your question.
I would just add something, Marvin. I would say I agree with Shani. Consistency is the key, um, because Shani, can you explain? Can you explain how the situation? I think you mentioned it. How the situation was like. Um, which language you had to use with whom in the house?
Right.
Can you explain?
Well, I think I said it earlier.
You said it. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, that I had to speak to you in French and Papa with English. I'm not sure if he has that context at home. But if he does, I would suggest it. If
Well,
not, then I would probably bring in a third party, like a tutor or something, to keep it going. But if they both
okay.
speak English, then I don't see how he can do it that way. I would bring in a tutor.
Okay, for Marvin, Marvin can speak excellent French. So Marvin, in terms of the French, is not the issue. But what I would say to Marvin is, it has to be set up in such a way that you always do it. So if you decide to say, okay, as of today, I speak French to well, you decide to speak French to your daughter, and your daughter will speak English to her mother. It has to be like that all the time. Even when you're tired, when you are fed up, you can't say, oh, today I can't be bothered. It has to be all the time. And that is the difficulty, because even me, I mean, I was speaking French to you all the time, but sometimes when your father was there, I felt a bit, shouldn't I say something in English? And in a way, I it was a little bit difficult. I found, because I wanted him to be part of it, but he had said, I would like her, or I would like them, talking about his two daughters, to speak French. So he wasn't bothered about that. And that's how we maintain this consistency. So, what I would say to you, Marvin, you have to be consistent, whether you're tired, fed up, everything.
Yes.
And it's hard work. Trust me, it's hard work. Another thing that Shani didn't mention, I don't know if you remember, you were very young, but I used to read stories in French to you. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember. I have all of them, and I think my favorite was Kirikou
Kirikou, okay.
with the little African boy. I remember. I think I still have them actually. They're on my bookshelf somewhere. That's another good way, actually, reading to them. Yeah, I didn't think of that one. That's true.
So Marvin is saying consistency is the issue indeed. I give her instructions in French, but the consistency is lacking. And I would say
Well,
yes, because it's not your mother tongue. So sometimes the English will just come out, and which is normal, and that is where the difficulty could be. But I believe that it can be done. I don't know if it has been done by anybody as yet, but I think it has been done. It can be done, sorry. But as I said, consistency. So
and it has to come from both ends, the parents and the child. I
yeah,
I think you've picked up already that I'm very lazy. I get things done, but I'm lazy when it comes to certain things. And for example, if I wanted to go out to the movies with my friends, there's no way I'm going or getting a response if I'm not asking to go in French. So things like that, wanting takeout or fast food or going out with friends, I had to ask the question in French to get what I wanted. So I don't know if that's when they're a little bit older, if that's something you can incorporate, but that's what had to be done for me because I was a bit resistant sometimes.
yeah. But I think the reason why I was asking you to do it like that, to ask in French, is because you were asking me in any case. And it's not because you're asking to go out that you have to change the language, because it was already like that. And when you had to ask your father, it was in English. So that
Yes, I
didn't
had to ask both. So I had to go ask. If I asked my father, he would say, "Go ask your mother." I have to go ask my mother in French, and then she would say, "Go ask your father." Now that I've asked my mother, I can go ask my father, but I have to do it in English. So I had to be constantly switching between the two languages, and I think over time, I think it helped. It worked well.
Mm. There's something I wanted to ask Shani to talk about, because we never really mentioned it. But now that you're much older, I remember when I used to take you to school. Um, School was, we used to walk to school.
Walk, yeah.
Yes, and I would speak to you in French, and then as we came closer to the school, you would
Uh-huh.
say in
Speak
French, you would
English.
say, please, mom, don't speak French. Don't speak French. Speak English now. Speak English. Can you explain to me why that changed? Did you feel that it was bad to speak French, even though people
Um,
knew that you had a French connection somehow anyway?
Well, when I started nursery, I couldn't speak English, so I don't know if they would remember, but the teachers would definitely remember a child that's coming to nursery and can't speak the language. That's like a big thing for them. But I think the reason why is, well, I mentioned that we were in England, and I mean, I'm not Caucasian. I was the only colored child in the entire school. And I was tiny. I was miniature. And so those two things already made me stand out. And as an outcast, I was already being bullied for my size and the color of my skin. I didn't have any friends. And then you want me to add on to that I speak French. You know, kids can be brutal. Kids are like the worst bullies. And I think maybe it was just my way of trying to give them less ammunition to bully me at school. But I mean,
Okay.
kids haven't really grown into who they are. And so I don't know if I was ashamed. It could be possible. I don't really remember the specifics, but um, that could be a reason, you know. But I think it was mainly the bullying problem that I had there. I didn't want to give them more ammunition.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. I would like to say to the viewers, especially those who are trying to experiment with their children, when you have, because I saw it with my two daughters, where performance at school wasn't top, and I was worried at some point, but a friend of mine who was in the same situation as me said to me, "Don't worry. At a particular age, it's going to be like this, but don't worry, it will get better." And I did feel that for the two of you at some point, but unfortunately, I cannot remember how old you were, but I think it was like maybe grade 5, no, grade 4, maybe grade 4. It was before we came to Jamaica. So where I felt that, you know, things could have been better. But the two of you did very well anyway. So I'm just saying to those who are trying that, if you see that there's, you know, it's not the performance of your child is not as you would expect, don't panic, because it means that this child is absorbing two languages at the same time
Mm-hmm.
compared with the child who is just learning one language.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say two languages, probably three, if you include the patois, for example. So it is quite a lot, and that's maybe the reason why, you know, you'd feel that they're not performing to the best of their abilities. But that, after a while, will go. So no panic. Okay. Yes. Very quickly, I'm going to go through the comments, because it's good to have comments. And I thank you very much for your comments, and say hi to all those who have taken the time to connect today. Um, yes, and Frenchican did say something to you that I saw it earlier. I can't remember where it is. Ce n'est pas la langue maternelle. She's saying that it's not the mother tongue, so it can be a little bit difficult. And I understand that if you if your mother tongue is not French, doing the French can be a bit difficult, even though you speak French fluently and so on. But it can be difficult. I have to say, even as a French person, I found it very, very difficult. And then she said as well, it's not just you, Shani. The Brian will choose what is easier.
Yeah,
So this is something, you know. So thank you very much, Panchikan.
that makes me feel better.
Yes, so it's interesting. Okay, one from Jean Fairclough. Hi, Jean. I'm an older student. I like learning the language, but I find it difficult. I believe I need immersion to help me to understand and speak better. Um, yes, of course, immersion will be better, but sometimes it's not always possible. What I would say is that the immersion, even if you are immersed at home, at least if you are at home by, as Shani said, watching films, listening to French music, and so on, this is your little immersion at home. Because the reality is that going abroad, especially nowadays, may not be possible. So we can just try to create that immersion at home. So, for example, I remember when Flo was flowing where we live, I used to have a TV5 Monde,
Hmm.
and TV5 Monde was on all the time. That was almost the only channel. I don't know if Shani remembers, but
Yes.
it was the channel which was put all the time, and I was doing that for the girls. Okay,
It's the
so
French channel for those that don't know.
yes, it's TV5 Monde, and it's with Flow. Digicel doesn't have it, unfortunately. But so, Jean, it's just a matter of persevering and creating your little immersion, um, especially with the type of music you like, the type of film you like. I mean, I'm not going to ask Shani to to say which film. Probably Jean may not be interested in your films because of the age gap. But especially on Netflix, you did say Netflix, you
Mm-hmm.
can have all this. So
I mean, there were two main ones. I think Lupin was in the top 10
Arsène Lupin,
in
yeah.
Jamaica, yeah. And then there was Family Business, but I don't know if it's as popular. But they're French made and they're
Problem the problem
series.
with the problem with Family Business, there's a lot of
Yeah, I would say for the
swearing.
adults.
I would say it's a lot
Yes,
of
there's a lot of
swearing. I
swearing.
didn't like it for that. So yes. Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Bonjour, bonjour to all my friends, Sophie, Joy, etc. Um, I have a question about your year of immersion in Guadeloupe. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you talked already about the language and so on, the difficulties in basically doing things like opening a bank account and having
Mm-hmm. Health
uh,
insurance and
health insurance
registering
and
for
so on.
school. Yeah.
My question to you is, were there any cultural aspects which you would consider as being shocking, considering that you know the country before you had been to France on several occasions? Yes, you were younger, but as an adult, you you went back to Guadeloupe, and did you feel that there were any
Major
cultural
shocking
shock?
things, essentially,
Yes,
culture
yes,
wise. Um,
yes. Now I'm
Actually,
more on
yes.
the culture.
Yeah, you'd think that me visiting the family every couple of years versus me living would be the same experience, right? It's very different. Um, but you have to also take into consideration my age when I did do it. I visited as a young child and then I came back as an adult. I think I'm more observant than I used to be, and there are certain things that I look out for. The first thing that I remember that was very bizarre to me, though I do take into consideration the size of the island in relation to Jamaica and the population size versus Jamaica. It's very different. But say we're walking down into town like halfway through, where it's generally quite packed to do shopping, the town center, and every single person you pass on the sidewalk tells you good morning. Every single person. That does not happen in Jamaica, or at least it does not happen to me. So I found that very shocking. They were very polite. I found that they were still pretty laid back, like in Jamaica, but I mean, we're in the Caribbean, so that's understandable. Um, that was the first thing. Um, it wasn't a shock to me because I grew up eating French food and being exposed to the culture. But for those that don't know, that the French love their pork. So for those Jamaicans or anybody else watching that does not like pork, I would say be careful. Make sure you know every word for pork, ham, bacon, everything. You're gonna have to look in the ingredients list and look because 85% of the ready-made preparations, food preparations, have pork in them. So you need to look out for that. The other thing that I found in Guadeloupe specifically was seafood was cheaper in my opinion than in Jamaica. And so fish was a lot more accessible for people on a budget. So I ate a lot more fish there than I do here in Jamaica. I see a lot of red meat, chicken, you know, ham, curry goat, oxtail, those things. Then it was more seafood. Not that we didn't have chicken and those things. Generally didn't see oxtail and curry goats and those things, but they have a lot of chicken. But that's fine with me because I prefer seafood anyway. Um, what else can I think of? Oh, something that shocked me that I never noticed growing up is the hugs. I'm sure everybody here who's not coming from a French family hugs their family members. I did a full year in Guadeloupe and did not get one hug. How many of you can survive a whole year without a hug? The first thing I did when I got off that plane was hug my family when they picked me up from the airport. That's the first thing I did. Right? So if you're a physical person, just mentally prepare yourself for that. And I actually decided to have a conversation with my aunt about it because I just did not understand how these people kissing on the cheek refuse to hug people. It made no sense to me. So what she explained to me is that it's based on intimacy. So for me, kissing someone on the cheek is more intimate because you're, face to face, but that's not how they view it. Kiss the cheek, it's really cheek to cheek. It's you're not like kissing them per se. Some people do it, but it's really supposed to be cheek to cheek, and you just make the sound and go about your business. Now she was explaining to me why they don't hug. So she was saying that the body surface area involved in the hug is a lot more than if you just kiss someone on the cheek. So that was her explanation why they don't hug. We just agreed to disagree at that point, but I did learn something, and I just thought I'd share it with people because I don't think that people realize. You'd think that a community of people who kiss on the cheek would be okay with hugging. Nope. So I think they only would hug their significant other. So I didn't get a hug from my grandma. I didn't get a hug from my uncle, not from my cousins. So it was a bit bizarre considering I was also used to the Jamaican culture where everybody loved to hug everybody, right? So that was the main thing that I don't think a lot of people know. Um,
Which is true because I never hugged until I had to
mhm,
do it.
yeah.
So yes,
Um,
I agree with
I
that.
was able to um experience carnival. Now in Jamaica, for people who have gone to Road March, it's very similar to Trinidad, where you come out with your expensive, you know,
Outfit.
skimpy outfits with the feathers, and it's like a show, right? But it's more for adults because it's a bit more crude depending on the perspective you're coming from. So when my uncle told me, "Oh, we're gonna go to carnival, come with," and my cousins, all of them are younger than me, they were coming with me. So I was like, is this age appropriate? But then, I just waited to see what was going to happen, and we just sat on the sidelines and we watched. And their carnival, or at least the part that I watched, was more of a carnival parade, and they encouraged kids to partake, which I thought was lovely. So all the kids from their schools, they came in their class with their classmates, and they had prepared all these handmade costumes, and they had their little choreography and their drums and their songs, and it was a wonderful experience. I don't know if I've never seen it done here, but for me, because I'm only used to the adult carnival, I found that not shocking, but it was nice to see. There might have an adult version later on in the night, but I wasn't there to experience it, so I can only speak for what I saw. Um, what else is there? Oh, it didn't come up in the year of immersion, but based on my upbringing, it's not shocking for me, but it will be shocking for English people. There's no reward system in the French culture. None. So they have the opinion or the standpoint that you as my child should do well. I birthed you, you should do well. And when you do well, it's not, oh hey, congrats, you did well. It's okay, it's expected from you. So when I remember we did GSAT and um was it GSAT? Oh no, I think it was CSEC. It was CSEC, and all my friends were discussing about when they get good grades, they get like money, or their parent takes them to a whole all-inclusive hotel for a week, or they get like a new laptop or a new phone. I didn't even have a phone in those days. And then they asked me because they always want my opinion because my parents had probably gotten this reputation of being strict. I would say strict. It was just different. And I was like, well, they give me a hug and pat me on the back, say good, and then go about our business. They say, you get nothing? Nothing? No. So I remember a friend got 2 or 3 thousand Jamaican dollars. That was a long time ago. So in those days, it was big money per
The
CSEC,
subject.
in which
Oh,
she
okay.
got one. So she would get like 3,000 for one, 2,000 for two, or whatever. And I think we did like um 9 to 10 subjects at our school. So she was getting a good lump sum because she was good at school. She got her one. So she got a good lump sum. And then they come to me and say, so what did you get? A high five? Congratulations. Yeah, I was the only one not getting anything. And I was like, boy, this is so weird. And I realized it was just the French side. I guess my dad just ran with it. And then
Well,
um
I have to say, the French side was
they're
very,
rough, man. They're hard.
was
They're hard to
very
speak to.
present in the house. It's true. Um,
And I will say that I remember when I graduated from high school, I was trying to explain to my French side of the family that I was graduating. And my mom and I were here thinking of like a word to translate. There's no word to translate graduation because the French don't have it. I think you go and pick up your diploma from the office or something like that. There's no ceremony or anything like that. The French don't have that. So I thought I'd share that.
it is true. It is true. And from the French point of view, if you say graduation, they don't really know what it's like unless they go and
And when you
attend.
tell them, they're like, okay, why are you celebrating that? She should have done that anyway. She's
That's
not
true.
paying bills. She's not working. The least she can do is do well in school.
Oh boy, yeah, it is very interesting because that is something that my daughter never told me, so I didn't know about that part.
I mean, I just
But it's
understood that I
true.
came from a different background and that's I wouldn't experience life the way they did. And so I just took it in stride. I didn't let it bother me, but they pointed it out to me and it stuck with me. And then I really thought about it and I was like, yeah, that's a massive difference.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. Any other thing about your culture or cultural differences?
Mm, well, I think everybody knows that the French like to drink. I mean, when I have friends over for like Sunday dinner, they always talk to me about why are you drinking so early? We have the apéro where we have a toast before we eat, which apparently all the Jamaican people that I have over is weird. But for me, it's normal. Every Sunday, we have our little apéro with some snacks, an alcoholic drink, and then we go into dinner. But some people find that weird. But I don't know if it's general knowledge, but that's the only other thing I can think of right now.
Okay. So, to go back to being bilingual, would you say that there's any, or are there any disadvantages or downside to it?
Um, there can be um not many reasons. I think there are more advantages than disadvantages. I did feel at certain points in my life that I wasn't moving as fast as I wanted to. But I guess that's just because I was managing more than the other people my age were managing. And I was also a year younger than my year group, so I don't know if that was part of it. But there's just a lot more going on up here than people realize. And I just wasn't, I mean, I was doing well, but I'm a perfectionist, so I always want to do really well. But I eventually found a balance and I knew what worked for me, and now I think I'm fine. But there were a few phases in my life, especially when French became more dominant. You need to slow down a little bit more. That's what I picked up for me. That was my experience. Code switching can be seen as a positive or a negative. Negative more when you're code switching because you're struggling, which I used to do when I was younger. I'd switch between languages when I couldn't remember the word or I couldn't remember how to conjugate the verb or things like that. But as you get older and you're managing, code switching can be a positive because, like, when we're in public and we're speaking in English and then we're, tapping into something that's a little bit more personal and you don't want the public to hear, you can just speak French. We used to do that in shopping center. Something comes up where you're on the phone where you don't want people to hear you, understand your conversation. We just say speak French, and most people wouldn't understand. You get those little few people who can also speak French and can understand what's going on, but the majority of people wouldn't know what you're talking about. Yes, you'd get a few weird looks and people might come and ask you, "Oh, is that Spanish?" But
Yes, you did.
mhm. But other than that, code switching is on the fence. It can be good or bad depending on the context. Um, I personally don't know if it's because I was bilingual or if it's my background or if it's the cultures that we had as a child, but I had a lack of identity growing up for a very long time, up until recently, actually. And sorry. So I was born in England, but I'm not Caucasian. I'm British, but I'm not accepted as by the British. Spoke French first, but I was born in England, so I'm not accepted as French by the French, despite my mom being French. So I'm French indirectly, even though I spoke French first. And then we migrated to Jamaica. My dad's Jamaican, half the family's Jamaican. I'm not seen as Jamaican because I was born in English, spoke French first, and I have an English accent. So I'm not accepted there. So it was kind of difficult to kind of, decide like who am I and where do I come from. So I've always had that issue where answering that question, where do you come from? Up till now, I don't know how to answer that question. I do it on a case by case basis and what the context is. So if I'm in England or Europe and British works for me, I'm going to use British. If I'm in the French system, I'm going to use my French passport and my French ID card. If I'm in Jamaica, I'll just use Jamaican. Otherwise, unless it's something a bit more official where I have to show birth of place, then I'll put the British. I just do it case by case. And then I've just learned to accept that I don't necessarily come from one place. I was born in a place, but I'm a melting pot of a person and I should just take what comes with it. And that's what I've had to do. And so far it's worked, but I still don't know how to answer the question, where do you come from? I asked them to clarify, do you mean where I was born? Because when we come into the whole mixing up bloods and the races, it gets even more complicated. So I just don't bother getting into it. I think those are the only disadvantages that I have.
Okay, interesting, interesting. We have a question from Marvin for you, Shani. At this
Mhm.
stage, do you process things first in French or English? I think I know the answer to that,
People
but
always
let's
ask
see
me
what.
this question, like, do you dream in French? Unfortunately in English at this stage. Maybe when I was younger and it was more dominant, it was French, but now it's English. English has just completely taken over. Um, Maybe if there's a case where I'm speaking in French or I'm in the French context, I don't necessarily have to translate from English. I can just speak. Um, but yeah, I hope that answers your question. I get that
Well,
question a lot.
Marvin, what I would say is that the process you're talking about, you um, it's always based on the language dominance. Okay, if you are in an English speaking country, it's going to be English, and if you are in a French speaking country, it's going to be French. That's how I see it, because even though I spoke a lot of French in the house, Shani spent most of her time with
At school.
English speakers. So when she goes to university, it's English. When she's with her friends, it's English. So even the little French that I use is just not enough, because English is just too much. But
Mhm.
now, if you were in a different situation, like in Guadeloupe, for example, she was in Guadeloupe. I'm sure that the situation was reversed, where everything is French, and probably is when your dad would phone you, you would have that little English, and I'm sure you would be happy to speak English.
Relieved.
Exactly.
I
So
do
that's
believe
how it
that
works.
it would have changed. I think that I was still in the phase where I was struggling to keep up, so I was still thinking in English. But if I had stayed longer, it would have switched. But I didn't stay there long enough for that to happen. But with certain things, when I'm talking to family members, it's not okay. I want to say this in English. Let me translate it. It just comes out. I don't think about it. The processing is already done upstairs. But certain things I still have to translate. So I don't think I hadn't fully converted yet, but I was on my way.
But I think as well, the reason why you went is also very important. Maybe you should mention it,
Mhm.
because it involved a lot of technical French, I would say,
Mhm.
jargon.
Well, I had applied to try medicine in France because I've I have loved the idea of the French system, and we said, try. You don't know what's gonna happen. I was young. I think I was 17, 18. When you're young, that's when you make your mistakes. That's when you try new things, and we decided, let's go for it. So I was there under the context of school, medical school, and I thought my French, the little French that I do at home, would be enough. So for those that know, science in itself is a language in itself, separate apart from which language you're doing it in. So we didn't really understand that until I was in it. So I had to, because I did science in English, I had to still be translating into, from French to English to understand what was going on. So that was another reason why the French the English was still pretty dominant while I was there. If it were a case where everything I was doing in French, and I could keep up, and maybe school wasn't really involved, then maybe I would have converted over into processing directly into French a lot faster. But that wasn't the case. Yeah, I remember recording my lectures and bringing them home and asking my grandmother to transcribe them. Between the two of us, we still couldn't get most of them done, so it was difficult. So yeah.
Yeah, because there were some medical terms, and there were quite a lot of stuff.
I think I had needed to have a foundation in science in French before I went, but now we know. And my French still did improve a lot. I was told I even lost my English accent while speaking French, which is wonderful, because you get teased about that sometimes. And I made a friend while I was there, and we're still in contact. Um, 8, 9 years later. So
Mm,
hmm.
yeah. Okay. All right. So, given the current situation with technology, Google Translate, and so on, do you think that after all, it's worth learning a language, since Google
even though
can
I'm
do
lazy,
everything
I
for
would
you?
say, even though I'm lazy, I would say don't take the lazy route because it does benefit you. um, I mean, yes, the Google Translate is accessible, it's quick, it's easy, but I think it when you travel to these places, I think it takes away from your experience. Um, Learning their language and speaking to a local in their language, it just allows you to appreciate more the people, the culture, the places you're seeing, than speaking into cell phone and having Google translate it for you. It's not really the same. And it takes away that wasted time where you're on this translator. Just speak, practice, you know. And I think learning another language, it just brings people together. There's way too much divide in the world nowadays. I think anything you can do to bring people together, we should do it. Um and I mean, learning a language for the youngsters, it's good on your university application. It's good on anyone's resume, actually, at any age. So even if you want to pick up a language in your 50s or 60s, do it. Might be a little harder. It's a lot easier for kids, but just do it and enjoy the journey. And it trains your brain, it keeps your brain active. So that's my response.
There's one thing I would like to add as well regarding your year doing medicine in France. You had to have the B2. Okay,
Right.
so for those,
Hmm.
yes, even though she knew a bit of French, that wasn't enough for the French to accept her to do medicine. It was really, that B2 which helped her.
Hmm.
So I'm just saying that I'm talking about the DELF. Okay, if you are familiar with this, the DELF. And that is the reason why, Shani, I push you to do all these exams. The DELF, you started with probably A2,
I think I
B1,
did
B2.
A2, B1, B2 junior.
Yes, yes, and I did that because I thought, well, just saying that you can speak French is not enough. You
Hmm.
have to show it on paper, and that's the reason why I was encouraging the two of you to do it. I know it was a pain. I know you didn't like it, and
No, I it was stress, but
I'm sure it was.
I rather have done it when I was younger at that age rather than now. So I'm grateful I did do it. And I did understand that these exams would just help me in the future. One way or another, we didn't know how it was going to help, but it would help. So I was all right doing it, but it did come with a little stress.
Mm,
I won't lie. All exams
mm,
are stressful. But it's
mhm.
pass or fail for those that want to try. you just they don't
Yes,
even have
yes.
a
As
grade
long as you have
between
50%, it's a
you
pass. So,
pass. And
yes.
I think they put the grade on the back on the certificate though. So that's a
Yeah, true.
yeah.
Yes. Um, there's a question for you from Joy. Given your melting pot of personalities, which do you prefer and why? That is a good question, Joy.
I would like to say I don't play favorites. I mm, to me they're not separate. They're just one, and it's just me. So I don't separate anything. Um, I think there's potential for me settling down in either three places: Jamaica, Guadeloupe, England. Though England is a bit cold and I like the warmth, but I don't separate or differentiate between them. To me, they're just what makes me as a whole person.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Different situations, I would probably lead more to one side than the other, but I wouldn't pick out one and say, okay, this is my favorite. I like specific things from each, and that's just the way I see it. I don't know if that's the answer she wanted.
I hope, Joy, she answered your question. Okay, so I have my last question for you. If you
Mhm.
have any more questions, please put them in the chat. My last question for you is you know that many French students go on to the TAPIF program,
Mhm.
teaching assistant program in France.
Right.
And some some will be having interviews pretty soon in January to
Mhm.
leave in October in 2022.
Mhm.
What would you say to those people, to those students who
The
will be
ones
going
that
to
want
France?
to apply.
Um, well, those who want to take part, but they are probably a bit, reluctant.
They're hesitant. Okay. Well,
And those who have applied, but they don't know where, what's going to be like,
I would
because they will
say,
be in France or in a French speaking country. So,
right.
what kind of advice can you give them?
Well, I would say go in with an open mind. I mean, for the ones that have already applied, I think your mind is pretty open to begin with. But I found that some people are very stuck in their ways and what's normal to them. You have to remember that you're entering, a
Talking
different
about their
place.
comfort zone.
Yeah, their comfort zone. And you're entering an environment where they did not grow up the same way you did. The things that are normal to you, like maybe eating oxtail in Jamaica, would be weird to them, right? And them eating escargot would be weird to us. But you just have to accept that it's part of their culture and try to experience as much of it as possible. I know people are like, oh, escargot, snails, I'm not going to eat that. Go and do your research. Try and understand why they eat it, how they're bred, why it's a delicacy, right? Do your research. Try. Yes, you might think, oh, I would never eat that, but remember, you're there to experience new things. Try it. At least try to know if you dislike it or you like it. There are some things that you say, oh, I would never like that, and you try it and you love it, but you will never know if you don't try, right? So I know I tried to convince my friends and introduce them to new things. But boy, I don't know if it's Jamaican people, but them difficult. I would say just try and try to, I would say, start on a blank slate, but be accepting to try new things. Try and be friends with the locals. Get friends that preferably don't speak your language, because what I found is that the people who speak your language and this your second language, they tend to switch into your language when you struggle, to make you feel better, but it's not for your benefit. You need to go through that phase of struggling to really benefit in the long run. And that's sort of what happened with me. The friend I made, he spoke both. And sometimes, and I'm lazy, so I was never against it. You just switch into English when I was either getting tired or forgetting words or just didn't know the vocabulary. You need someone who's going to be strict with you and say, okay, we will work it out, but in French. You have to stick to the French if you want to improve. You just have to put in that extra effort and, yeah, go sightseeing, understand the people, understand the culture, and understand why they eat and drink certain things and why they do certain things that may differ from where you're from. And that's about it. Make the most of it, because I don't think it's an experience you will regret. And I think if you don't get the full experience when you're older and you've traveled more and you appreciate the differences in cultures and people, you will maybe regret it in the future. So if you're not able to go back, that is. So that would be my advice.
Okay. All right. Yes, Seaview Garden Community Cricket Team. Hello, bonjour. You are right. One has to start with an open mind, and that is very important,
Yeah.
because if you don't have that open mind, you're not going to succeed really. You have
And
to
the way I
open.
see it is, you are applying to this program. And I'm sure if they ask you in the interview why, you're going to talk about wanting to learn about new culture and, master your French and this and that. But what is the point of going closed minded, not experiencing these things, and then coming back the same way you came? A full year that should change you as a person and for the better. So
It's
going
not
closed
quite a
minded,
full year. Is a
it's a
full academic year, not a full
well, for
year.
academic year. I don't
Yeah.
think you should come back as the same person the one you left. That's just my opinion. For me, it would be a wasted experience. Even when I'm traveling or going on vacation for 2 weeks to a month, I just try to, break down the walls and just try everything. If they fry cockroaches or crickets, you just try a little piece. You're apprehensive, but you try, and you decide you don't like it. Okay, you never have to do it again. But the point is, you tried it, you know. And Yeah, that's my stance. Maybe there are people who disagree. But something like that, I would not waste that time and that experience and that exposure, because not everybody has been blessed to go through what you're going through. So, you know, learn all these things, come back and, educate people here that can't do what you've done, share your experience. That's what I would say.
Which is what you're doing now.
Well, I guess.
Yes, that's what you're doing. Okay. All right. Well, we're going. I don't have any more questions for you, Shani. I think you've answered all the questions that I had as a mother.
Mhm.
And I'm just going through quickly what people are saying. Nobody says très agréable.
Mhm.
I don't know who nobody is. Um,
I
Joy
agree with the comment
saying
though.
response is just fine. So she's
I
happy with
agree.
the response to her question. So that's fine. Okay. So, well, for those who uh, are hoping to have a bilingual child, what I would say is that I would say that it's something which can be done, but
Mhm.
you have to involve everybody in the family. Okay, it's not just you saying, I'm just going to speak French to my child. It's a team thing. If I'm referring to Marvin, who mentioned it earlier, if he's going to speak French to his daughter,
Mhm.
then the mother, the wife, needs to understand that
Mhm.
and agree
Mhm.
that this is what's going to happen, and it will always be like that, and that will be for 18 years at least.
Mhm. But I would also say,
So
once a child is older, do some of those external examinations like what I did, because you can't go into an interview and say, I grew up speaking French. Have something to show for it. That can hold a lot of
okay.
weight, qualifications. I would say do the exams once they're older.
Okay, so beauty queen Carrie says, why do you have a toast before you eat?
That's a good question. Why don't you have a toast before you eat? Where we toast to health, good life, staying healthy, staying safe. Why don't people toast before they eat?
Well, I
Well,
have to say, in the family, we don't have a toast every day. I know some French
mhm,
people have it every day, but for us, it's really weekend, like Sunday in
Sunday.
particular,
Yeah.
Sunday dinner, and we have our little aperitif. And yes, that's how we do it. But it's part of the culture. I mean, the French do it that way, and I must say, taken a lot of that culture into my life. So I'm sure for my daughters, it's a bit strange because you have a lot of French, but you're not in France. Okay, a French culture, but you're not in France. So I'm sure it was a little bit confusing at times, right, Shani?
As a child, I did not find it weird. I didn't find it confusing. It was just how we lived
Okay.
life at home. It was
Yeah.
normal to me.
Mm. Okay, bonjour, Chrisanne. She says, how was it for you speaking both languages at home? Was it difficult? Actually, we didn't talk about the level of difficulty. Did you find it difficult? That is a good question, Chrisanne.
Did I find it
Thank you.
difficult? I
Sorry,
don't
what did
think
you
diff-
say?
I don't think difficult is the word I would use. Um, no, I didn't find it difficult. It was more, not demanding is not really the word I want, but I found that as I got older, when I was tired or lazy and just couldn't be bothered, I'd, stick to English, which I even do now sometimes, though I'm making the
She
conscious effort
does.
to
She
speak French.
does.
Yes. you know.
does.
But no, I don't think it was difficult at the point where I was really into it and switching from English to French. It was pretty normal to me, and I think me being able to do that was a good thing. So it didn't bother me. So no, I don't think it was difficult. It was just part of speaking, really, in my household. I didn't think of it, oh, I have to do this to practice, or it was just
Yeah.
done. It wasn't like, okay, you're grounded if you don't do this. It was just part of our way of life as kids. That's how it was done in our household. When we left outside, we just spoke to the person in the language that they spoke. And when we came back, we had our rule. That's just,
Mhm.
that's how we approached it. So no, it wasn't really difficult. I mean, when I got a little older and I wasn't speaking French as much, obviously not the year of immersion, um and you know if you don't practice you forget, and I would forget a lot of vocabulary. That then you could say was maybe a little difficult when I'm stumbling for words. But even that, that's not a big deal for me. I'll just say, what's the word for blah blah blah, and we move on, right? So no, I didn't find it difficult.
Well, Beauty Queen Carrie wasn't happy with your answer because she asked the question again. Why do you have a toast before you eat?
Maybe she sent it. Well, I don't know. I'll have to speak to my family and see why they do it. Maybe different people have it for different reasons, but I do know that the French like to drink their wine, and so that's a good enough excuse for them to be drinking. Um, was your mother always correcting your grammar and pronunciation? Yes. Yes, she was, and rightly so, because my French side, the French are very strict on grammar and pronunciation, and so she can't have a child going over there for holiday and speaking to her grandmother and her family, and pronouncing things wrong, and it just doesn't look good. It's not a good look. So yeah, she was always correcting and my grammar and pronunciation. Well, not the grammar, because growing up I didn't learn how to write. It was
You were just repeating.
I was
Sometimes you
just
wanted to say
repeating.
something
Right.
where you needed a subjunctive. You just repeated it.
Yes,
I
because
never
I didn't know
explained
the
to you what
grammar.
it was.
Right, because I
Yes.
didn't know the grammar. I just kind of absorbed it and eventually had a feel for when to use what. But I didn't officially learn the grammar until I was forced to do the CSEC. So the pronunciation growing up is what she corrected, and rightly so. So, I think there's another question. Do you plan to have bilingual children also in the future? How would you approach it? I would love to, but I do believe that I would have to brush up on my French a little. I do want to take the adult C1 day in the future. But yes, I would probably take a similar approach to my mom because I don't see myself ending up with a Frenchman. Um, so I do think we would be in a similar situation where one parent would be speaking English and I would be speaking French. So I would probably take the same approach. Um, yeah, and I mean, their grandmother or their great grandmother wouldn't be speaking English, so communication has to happen. So they gotta learn it one way or another. So yes, they would.
And the French side of the family, they just don't
Hmm.
speak English. So
And
uh,
there's
even
no
the youngsters, they
disadvantage.
don't. So,
There's no disadvantage to them learning a language. So if you can do it, do it. Mhm.
okay. All right. Then thank you very much for your questions, for your comment. Thank you very much. I think it was a good way of starting this new year, which I hope will be wonderful for you, for all of you.
Mhm.
Okay, Shani, thank you very much. I've learned a lot because we never really had those kind of conversation before. It
Yes, this
never
was the
occurred to
first
me.
verbal
It's the
conversation.
very first time we have that conversation, and I just felt that I would share it with my viewers because to tell you the truth, I didn't know what she was going to say. I thought maybe she would say something bad about her mother, but the, the whole idea, I mean, she knows that everything was done for her or for them, because she has got a sister as well. The whole idea was to give them an advantage. Okay, so that was the idea. And when you did French CSEC, it wasn't at school, so you had to do it on your own. When you did the DELF B1, B2, you had to do it on your own. So you did a lot of hard work. Of course, I was there to help, but Shani did it on her own, really. And Shani, I always said to you, you did very well, because doing
I had to. I don't like to fail.
Exam in 3 months.
Yeah, I don't like to fail, so I had to figure it out.
Yes, but you did very well. So it's well, you were given that opportunity, you took it. I know you were you probably said no at first, if my memory serves me right.
Yes, because I was thinking I am obsessed with scheduling and organizing stuff. So I'm thinking, how can I possibly fit 5 years of work into 3 months? It's impossible. So I was like, there's no way I'm going to put myself in a situation where I'm going to fail an exam. It just doesn't make sense. But you convinced me.
And in terms of the grammar, for just to share that, Shani, can you tell them what you did in terms of the grammar? The book that you
the book we used.
I think it was French first year.
First year, second year. I think it's 2 big books. In Spanish, we have. In Spanish, we have the equivalent, the Primer Libro book. I don't know if I remember the name correctly.
Yeah, it's the same as El Primer
very thick
Libro.
book with grammar. Very thick book with hundreds of grammar.
So basically, she did all the exercises.
I did the entire 2 books.
And then I had to correct them, because they
if you're going to put me in a situation where I have to pass this exam in 3 months, you better be marking it.
So this is how it was done. Yeah. Okay, so I think it's time to go, and thank you very much for watching. And if you want the playlist that she was talking about, please contact us. Okay, and we'll provide you with this. Okay, don't forget, it's frenchaction1@gmail.com. Okay, merci, au revoir. Au revoir. Au revoir, Shani.